Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and these are my thoughts on Lanny by Max Porter. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, so in February I picked Lanny by Max Porter as one of my kind of random choices from my shelves. It was on my top 10 list of top 10 physical books I wanted to read for my Read What You Own challenge. I've had it on the shelf since I think last May. And I started reading it one evening in February and was completely captivated by it immediately. I couldn't put it down. It was my book of the month for February by a country mile. So today I want to talk about it in a bit more depth, tell you kind of why I really fell in love with it, and hopefully potentially inspire some of you to read it if you haven't already. It's a strange book, this one, and so the format of this kind of thoughts of review video will be a little bit different from some of my others. I'm just going to have a chat about it basically. I won't give away any spoilers for major plot points, but I will be reading some excerpts from it because it's the writing of it that is what I love the most. There's a lot to love, but that's what I like. The style, I like the prose above everything else, really. So yes, if this review might be a little bit more kind of informal, casual, messy, I don't know what you want to call it, but I'll try not to waffle on too long. So the summary then, Lanny, the title character, is a wonderfully strange, enchanting, and very sensitive little boy who has kind of an affinity for nature and creativity. Is seemingly well liked by everyone in the small rural village where he lives with his mum and dad. A village that's kind of, I think it's described as kind of within commuting distance of London. His dad works in London. But despite him being kind of the title character, we don't actually really hear that much from him directly within the narrative. We get to know him and his sort of idiosyncrasies, etc., through the eyes of his mum and dad, and through the eyes of an aging artist called Pete, and sort of a cast of the local residents. You know, we get to know about all the different relationships and kind of interactions and stuff like that through this large cast. It's almost a chorus of the villagers. We also see Lanny through the eyes of Dead Papa Toothwort, if Dead Papa Toothwort has eyes at all, who is a strange and enigmatic sort of spirit entity of the kind of woodland, the nature in the local area. He's very eerie and mysterious and mischievous, and he listens to the village and its inhabitants, and we're never quite sure of the nature of his intentions, really. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he somewhere in between? He's a very strange character. This is bits of folklore, mythology, mystery. It's a tale of family, childhood, friendships, all rolled into one. But at its heart, it's about love, I think, for sure. And I think it's an absolutely beautiful book in so many ways. There is an absolute ton of stuff that I adore about this. As I said before, it's the writing style that I found the most enchanting. But I think it is one of those kind of somewhat rare books where sort of the three, what I think of the three main elements that go into making a really great story, a really great book, are all there. So you have really good character development, You have a really interesting, mysterious, and kind of intriguing plot, really good plot, and you have, in my opinion, some absolutely stunning writing, prose, and they all work so wonderfully well together. I think because of the bold choices that Porter has made when it comes to both the prose style and the format of this book as well. It is an odd one. There is some odd sections in it. I will read you the opening of it. Dead Papa Toothwort wakes up from his standing nap an acre wide and scrapes off dream dregs of bitumen glistening thick with liquid globs of litter. He lies down to hear hymns of the earth. There are none, so he hums. Then he shrinks, cuts himself a mouth with a rusted ringpull, and sucks up a wet skin of acid-rich mulch and fruity detritivores. He splits and wobbles, divides and reassembles, coughs up a plastic pot and a petrified condom, briefly pauses as smashed fiberglass bath stumbles and rips off the mask, feels his face and finds it made of long-buried tannic acid bottles. Victorian rubbish. Tetchy Papa Toothwort should never sleep in the afternoon. He doesn't know who he is. So yeah, there's a lot of wordplay going on with this. There's a lot of very strange imagery going on that kind of makes you think of this entity that kind of moves through the detritus of the landscape, through the litter, and also through the natural elements, the trees. There's lots of references, to him and his kind of connection to the nature, the natural elements of the world as well. But his sections are very strange. They remind me in some respects of some of like Carol Churchill's writing from the Scriker, and also some of Robert Macfarlane's writing in Ness. So yeah, he's a very strange character, that Papa Toothwort, and he kind of comes in and out of the story, and we see him listening to, or we kind of experience him listening to the snippets of conversation in the village, and that's kind of how he interacts, if you like. That's how he kind of is a part of the landscape of the environment, and you get this in the form of these kind of swirling, rolling text forms in his sections. So you get his bits, and then you get these kind of like snippets, like the snippets of conversation floating through the air to Dead Papa Toothwort. And these are fantastic. These are like so astute in terms of like observations of the sort of things people say. Certainly it's very British. it's very English even, and I know it's as I say, it's set kind of in the south within commuting distance of London, but I think one of the strengths of this is that this village feels like it could be anywhere in England. When I read this, I ended up having to read it out loud quite quick. I realised quite quickly I need to read this out loud, and my wife was away at the time, so fortunately I had the house to myself and I could do so. But I couldn't help but read it and hear it in a northern accent. I think, it does feel like it could be my village. Do you know what I mean? I live in a rural village, and it could be where I'm from. It's got that kind of universality, I think, that works so well. But yeah, some of these are like really funny, poignant, kind of give you a glimpse into maybe some of the darker sides of people's thinking. And there's tons of them throughout. Some of them made me laugh out loud, and as I say, some of them are just quite poignant or foreshadowing, things like that. But I'd be here forever if I picked out all of the ones, but there's just a couple even just on these first pages which I really like. Just like Clean Forgot Milk. How are your knees? It's an AstroTurf burn, not cancer. What else have we got? Special delivery and signed for are not the same thing. Shrieking like sexed up foxes. Marxist knitters unite. Brings up toxic masculinity, every single book club. There's just, lots and lots of little snippets. It gives us an idea of some of the residents of the village. Because most of them aren't named, most of them we hear from, but they are, say, they're like a chorus. So the book is split into 3 parts, and each one is quite different. So the first one really sets up the characters, the environment, the character relationships, and kind of makes you fall in love with them all, really. You know, and it includes kind of a lot from Dead Papa Tooth words, and you get, that's the mystery really, is what is he and what is he planning, what are his intentions. So yeah, you get to know Lanny through these characters' observations and interactions. Lanny is a strange child. He kind of comes out with some really strange things as well. There's a section here from Pete, when he's with Pete, who's an old artist. It says, often as he works, Lanny says strange and wonderful things, mumblings, puzzling things for a child to say. I'm a million cameras even when I'm sleeping, clicking, clicking. Every second something is growing and changing. We are arrogant flashes in a grand, magnificent scheme. I burst out laughing. You what? Where did you get that from? Not sure, he says. He tilts his head and some half-formed secret thing slips out of his mouth and disappears into the space between us. Times like this, Lanny almost seems possessed. It's like, yeah, there's quite a few bits like that. He comes out with some really strange but quite enchanting things. He's like, you know, it's almost like he's got one foot half in another world. He's a really lovely character, Lanny. As I say, he's very sensitive. Then you've got Lanny's mum, who is very devoted to her son. They have a lovely relationship. She just kind of accepts his idiosyncrasies and oddities and embraces them and wants to nurture him as a kid. She worries a little bit about what she does, what people think of her and her as a mother. She writes like quite gory, quite dark crime thrillers. And she I think she worries a little bit about that and how that will affect Lanny, stuff like that. But she is really devoted to him and they do have a really lovely relationship. But like Lanny's dad is kind of, he loves his son very much, but he doesn't get him, and that's kind of a source of frustration, a source of kind of sadness to him. He can't feel that same closeness that Lanny's mum does to him. And he again worries that he's just kind of odd, that Lanny's just a bit odd. And yeah, that's kind of a bit of a bone of contention as well, a bit of a kind of a separation point between him and Lanny's mum. They kind of have arguments or discussions about that. That's obviously a strain in some respects. But you know, it's about, you know, for him it's about his dad learning to just accept Lanny as he is and accept that he's okay, and that, you know, there are plenty of people around him who are going to nurture him and make sure that he's all right and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a very different dynamic between Lanny's mum and Lanny and Lanny's dad and Lanny. And then you get to Pete, the artist, who I think has to be my favourite character in this. I love Pete. Pete is an ageing artist, kind of formerly famous, very famous artist, used to do loads of work in London and now lives in a rural environment, is a self-confessed miserable old bastard, and makes kind of sort of little strange metal birds and things like that is his art. But Pete kind of gets to know Lanny because Lanny's mum asks him to essentially tutor Lanny in art, which Pete is initially resistant to because he doesn't want to teach. But they kind of work it out in terms of, you know, something that works for them, a situation that works for them. And watching Pete like nurture the creativity and at the same time help Lanny improve his art, and the way that they interact is just lovely. I absolutely adore it. There was one section that particularly sort of hit home for me with Pete and the art. Yeah, this bit is where Pete and Lanny have just started their kind of art lessons. This is Pete talking. 2 chairs pulled up to the kitchen table. Snug. Fire on, radio 3. 2 pads, 2 pencils, a tumbler of juice, a mug of tea. Ah, Lanny, my friend, look at these blank pages. Don't you feel like God at the start of the ages? You could do anything. So go, I said. Draw me a man. What man? Any. Just a person. Something human. I tossed a little coin in my head between tree and man, and it landed on man, so let's start with that. His shoulders roll over, right, slightly higher, as his arms hug the page, and he starts to scratch away with a soft hum-cum whisper of half words and trickling bits of melody. Concentrated. He's not a rusher. He scratches his head, sits up and slides the drawing over. Furrowed brow. Right, let's look. Yep, I'd say that was a man all right. Nicely done. Now let's talk our way around him a bit and see what's what. The grimace of concentration is gone and Lanny's face is wide open, curious and listening. His eyes are like spring hornbeam, a very fresh green. Right, Lanny, where do your arms come out? You've got this bloke's arms coming out the side of his body. What do you reckon? We turn sideways and spread our arms, 2 aeroplanes at the kitchen table. Lanny smiles and nods down to his shoulders, and then starts a new pair of arms emerging from the right height, not out the poor bastard's centre. Now the head, Lanny. Might I ask you to consider your own self and see if there's anything between your head and your chest? He grins and points to his neck, feigning discovery. We laugh. We're pleased. We chink drinks and raise a toast to the better-looking image of a man. I love that section. I know that's a long section for me to read out, but that was another point in the book where I love this. I love this book so much. So yeah, part 1, you've got kind of these separate sections titled with the character's name, and it's their kind of section where you learn about them and Lanny through them. And you get very much more kind of concrete information on their characters. You know, you get much more, you get to know them really well. And then you've got all of this stuff from Dead Papa Toothwork, which gives you more of an idea of what he might be, or what he's kind of, what he does in terms of his movements, things like that. But he's still very mysterious, and it just kind of, it drip feeds sort of an air of eeriness or possible threat, but you're not quite sure. But he's also quite funny. He's got there's some sort of slightly dark humour to it as well. And as I say, that's the poetic stuff, like I read at the beginning. I've got one more bit from him that I want to read because I found it just, this one made me chuckle a lot. So when he's come into the village, it's kind of an annual festival where people dress up as Dead Papa Toothwork. He's kind of, you know, sort of a green man type sort of figure, where he's celebrated as part of the culture of the village. And there's loads of pictures of people dressed up as him, and he can kind of move through the village a bit easier because there are people around dressed up like him. He leaves the village riding the smells from the kitchens, spinning and surfing, wafting and curling, from Jenny's lasagna to Larton's microwave stroganoff, Derek's hot pot for one. Such rich sauces, so much sugar, was never so varied as this, not very recently dead meat dressed in fancy flavours. He laughs, funny, busy worker bees of the village stuffing their faces and endlessly rebuilding and replacing things. All they are is bags of shopping and bags of rubbish. He takes such offence to the smell of Pam Foy's stirring jalfrezi sauce that he tears a bit of his nightmare skin off and shoves it through a window. A truly horrid dream. Sleep well, Pam, he chuckles as he floats homeward across the field. I love that. Sleep well, Pam. There's so much warmth in this writing, even when you get to some of the sort of more unnerving and sort of haunting bits. There's still, I don't really know how to describe it. Warmth is one way, but yeah, it's a fullness of writing. I think that's what it is. So beyond part 1, which I've spent quite a bit of time talking about because that's the bit I can talk about without spoiling things. Part 2 then shifts quite dramatically. There is a plot point here at the beginning of part 2, which I will not spoil. And then, you know, that kind of takes you through the rest of the book. But things take quite a dark turn. The format of the book shifts as well, away from these kind of separate character sections, and into kind of more of a, almost like a puzzle, I would say. It's kind of split up with these kind of little crosses, and it's essentially like little bits of thought or conversation, things like that. It could be a line, it could be a paragraph. And these are from many of the unnamed villages, as well as they are from some of our characters, but our characters we've got to know, like Lanny's mum and dad, etc. And yeah, it's you kind of have to figure out maybe who's talking, or, you know, sort of how these bits connect together. And they all relate back to this incident, but also kind of how some of the sort of darker side of the village kind of comes out. The intolerances, the suspicions, things like that, scapegoating that goes on based on, you know, related to this incident, how people jump to conclusions, and the sort of splits within this village that to start with seem like quite a, you know, close-knit rural community, but when something bad happens, that's when people kind of show their kind of darker colours, and that's quite, some of that's quite sort of chilling's the wrong word, but it's quite unsettling. Some of it's quite sad, in terms of just kind of acknowledging how people are, you know, how people can think, the sort of things people can think. But it's a really interesting shift in the way that you read it, in the fact you are having to, like, you're jumping around a lot from character to character, and you get to know the village as a whole. It's almost like the village becomes a character through this chorus, this conglomeration of villagers' voices. And then again in part 3 it shifts, and basically kind of goes to a third person narrative where we get, it focuses down again on Dead Papa Toothwort and Lanny's mum, dad, and Pete, but it gets quite strange. It gets much stranger and much more kind of, magic realism's the wrong word, surreal at parts, most definitely. Not too much so for me. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fact that it ramped up throughout. The first part is a lot easier to kind of get on board with. There's a lot of grounded stuff in the first part, and then because it works its way up to a much more kind of surreal plot, if you like, it doesn't ever feel overly kooky or anything like that to me. I was so into it at that stage. I was so captivated by it that it just kind of rolled into me. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, that kind of deals with the sort of resolution of this incident, if you like. But yeah, the plot works really well. The pacing works really well in terms of the way it's split up in 3 sections. Let's say the characters in it are all fantastic. They are all very much of, you can recognise someone that you know in there. Certainly if you're British, I think you will, and certainly if you've ever lived in a rural area, you will definitely recognise many of the sorts of characters that are in here. I think that's one reason why I love it so much. It speaks to me and to my experience of living in that kind of environment, both growing up in that kind of environment and now as an adult coming back to that sort of place. It's just such a well-rounded book. It's such a lovely book. So the themes and the ideas in it, and the way that it talks about family and friendship and acceptance, belonging, embracing your oddness, about, you know, the kind of how people behave in, you know, when things turn a little bit difficult, you know, how people jump to conclusions about others. You know, there's a lot in there to dissect, but it, as I say, it rolls over you so easily that it just kind of seeps in through the pores, I think. But at its heart, as I say, it is about love. And yeah, I think I'll leave it there. It is a book about love. It is a book that I love. I will quickly pop up my ratings on screen. I did say in my my wrap up for February that I gave this a 9 out of 10, but I'll pop up the full rating for you to have a look at. Because yeah, this one is the highest rated book I've had this year. The aggregate score before I rounded it down to 9 out of 10 was a 9.33, and every single category within my rating was high. If this has to end up on my top 10 of 2024, I don't see how it can't, and it's going to take something pretty damn special to beat it out from the #1 spot at the moment. Yeah, absolutely stunning book, and extremely inspiring, creatively speaking. Looking at the way that Porter's structured this, the bold choices, looking at his use of language, how he uses that language to really convey character, especially when it comes to people like Dead Papa Toothwort, or things like Dead Papa Toothwort. The way that he kind of evokes atmosphere and sense of environment, things like that, the world, the setting, is really well done. And yeah, I think I'll take a lot of inspiration from this, just in terms of trying things out, just not being scared of maybe going off the beaten track a bit when it comes to kind of writing a slightly different prose style. Just kind of, just give things a go and see how they come out. Don't be afraid to be a little bit more poetic sometimes with stuff if I've got characters or environments, stories that call for that. So yeah, really rewarding experience reading this, really valuable experience. Anyway, I'll stop fawning over it for now. Do let me know in the comments if you've read this and what your thoughts on it were. Yeah, I'd definitely be interested to discuss this more with people. If you want to chat at length about it, I'm well up for that. You can hop on over to my Discord, find me there. Just go into the general chat section is fine for that, if you want to chat about it more. But yeah, that will do from me today. I've rambled on long enough about this one. So thank you very much for watching, certainly if you're still with me at this point. As I say, do drop me thoughts in the comments down below. It's always lovely to hear from you all. I will be back on Sunday with a little chat / update on my writing journey. I've finished a short story this week, and so I'm going to have a little bit of a chat about that to you, and maybe read you a couple of excerpts from it as well. So do tune in on Sunday for that if you're interested. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.